Welcome to My Money Mindset podcast, where we explore how a healthy mindset is the foundation for financial success. Each week, we delve into mindset hacks and practical strategies to help you enhance your income, help you make more appropriate investments for yourself, and to improve your overall financial well-being. Join us on this journey to transform your financial future by transforming your mindset. Please note that the information provided on this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute as personal, financial or health advice. It has been prepared without considering your individual objectives, financial situation or life needs. Before making any financial or health decisions, you should consult with a qualified professional or financial advisor to ensure the information aligns with your specific circumstances. So let's begin and enjoy this journey as each episode teaches us on how to improve our overall mindset that overall improves our financial success. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Money Mindset. Just a quick episode today in relation to fractional investing and how tenants in common work. So it's somewhat related, but I have had a few people, especially as property starts to increase in price, a lot of people getting knocked out of the market. They don't have enough deposit. They may not be able to afford right now, but they'd like to invest in property as in investors and stuff like that. They've seen that there have been potential opportunities with the NDIS and a few other things as in for super, but as in property wise, specific properties for NDIS, SDA property, which is been very apparent in the last several years, simply because of the high demand and the high income that it returns. But this episode is in relation to pretty much just fractional investing and what it entails. Fractional investing sort of enables you to sort of buy a portion of the property. So if you could imagine, call it out of a pie, if you had a pie cut up into 10 pieces, one of those 10 pieces could be yours, and that pie represents the property. You buy that piece of the pie. Now, 9 times out of 10, what I normally see in this day and age is with fractional investing, it enables you to buy a portion of the property which is in the vicinity of roughly 5%. What happens here is whoever's organising the property to be set up as fractional investing can often own roughly between 55 to 65 or 75% of the property, or more. It does variance, but on common grounds, most of the time it's on residential property or NDIS properties. It's roughly 65% that they own, and they release little 5% segments of the property, so your ownership is 5%. Now, depending on the contracts, which you'd obviously have to have checked by your solicitor, but sometimes those 5% you can buy 5% plus another 5% to the discretion, obviously, what's on the contract. That's all dependent on the property. Great way to buy it, simply if you've got 5%. So basically how it would work is that most of the costs are incurred. So let's say the property's worth $1 million and you've got $50,000 that you'd like to invest. That would be your 5%. Obviously look at the fees that are incorporated when it comes to fractional investing. It's purely for investment. Make sure that all the contracts and any lease agreement, anything to do with the legal side of things, get it double checked by a solicitor. But 5%. So as an example, let's say you've got $50,000 or close to it, 60,000 or thereabouts, and it's not enough for a property that you want to buy for yourself. You still want to invest that 50-odd thousand, but obviously you don't want to pay lender's mortgage insurance. So you say, well, look, fractional investing would be great. Now make sure just with the fractional investing contract before you sign anything as well, that the terms and conditions fit your sort of goal procedure, and your goal procedures Let's say you might want to keep this fractional investing 5% or 10% piece indefinite. That's up to you. Obviously, read the contract. But if you wanted an early exit, so for instance, if you had to sell your 5% portion, when you can sell it, so it's pretty much very similar to that of shares where you can buy and then sell type of thing. Sometimes they have a clause on there that the majority shareholder will get first right of refusal to purchase your shares. So for instance, you may own 5%, 12 months goes by, or whatever the term allows you to sort of exit. So let's say earliest term you can exit is after 12 months on the contract, and you say, look, I want to sell my 5%, they'll get first right of refusal, as in the majority shareholders, to buy that 5% off you at a pre sort of determined price. Once again, that should be all checked before entering, all that type of thing. So you want to make sure that the return on investment is appropriate to what is okay in your eyes, and make sure you have the accountant look at that and your solicitors to go over the contract. So great way to do it, especially if you've only got 5%, but once again, check all the terms and conditions. You sort of get all the benefits from owning the property without all the expenses, right? So who really would sort of go for this or consider something like this? Probably young investors with a small cash deposit, investors who sort of can't get a approval to purchase for whatever reason that may be, right? So SMS investors with cash in super, looking to get a better return, that sort of thing. Once again, check all this with the financial planners, accountants, solicitors. Conservative investors not wanting to commit to a large investment, so they may want to buy, let's say for instance there's opportunity to buy 5% in one property, 5% in another, 5% in another, and so on and so forth. You get the drift. So a bit of diversification in investment. Also a great way to sort of diversify risk. Some of the properties, so let's say for instance you give 5% in property 1, 5% in property 2 and 5% in property 3. You own 5% of each of those rather than just buying 15% of one. You may find that one property growth is better than the other for whatever reason, or better returns. Once again, you have to check the financials on that particular property and what's being offered. But it sort of allows a conservative investor to sort of diversify their risk. So for instance, out of those 3 properties from the example, if one was not to go as great, they might turn up and say, look guys, I want to sell my 5% out of the not so great property and probably buy another one that comes up or what have you, right? So it enables a bit of diversity and control over that, which in hindsight enables a little bit of less anxiety. The more sort of micro properties or shares that you own, you can sort of play around with them and pick and choose. Obviously, it's not as liquid as shares, for instance. There is probably a little bit more paperwork involved with some of these investment or properties opportunities, but yeah, it can be done. So most of the time, just in governance of the deposit required, it's probably around 50 to 60,000 investment, which will buy you a 5% property. That's in today's, but different investments harbour different requirements, right? And you are on the title as an owner of your share, right? So that's probably a more secure thing, less anxiety once again for the investor, and you obviously get all the capital growth benefits that come along with the property, that particular property, and you can sell at any time, so benefiting from the full capital gain of the share. Most of these, once again, just double check when you are going to sell that it would be in the contract, all the terms and conditions, and some of them are pretty good. I've seen some of these return up to 12% per annum, right? And they're paid monthly, so they are pretty good. But obviously you've got to check what you sort of looking at. Most of the time with the NDIS properties or SDA, NDIS SDA, it accommodates for people with disabilities, right? So those figures are quite high. Obviously, the other thing you want to have a look at is forecast, to have a look if NDIS and if the income is going to be as great. A lot of this NDIS properties run off the bat of sort of the government funding that people get in this. So, but once again, it is a requirement that NDIS SDA properties are required on a high demand. This is at the moment, right? And that could change. So you want to check those risks as well. Just like, once again, with any investment, the higher the risk, generally it's a higher return. But you really want to cover your bases and get a full blown education upon what's going on. Always understand where your money's going. Just don't do it because it sounds great. So the best way to sort of understand this is to understand that the fractional investing helps you diversify. It's not the be all end all. It's not of investments. Sorry, it's not the be all end all of investments. It certainly is something that if you are a keen investor and you don't have the money to consider, run it past the professionals and talk to them. It's very similar. Like I wanted to also in this episode just quickly explain tenants in common. What tenants in common is. People have asked me to sort of explain what it is and how it sort of somewhat relates to what we were just talking about, fractional investing, but a little bit different. So you may have heard the term tenants in common and joint tenants, two separate things. So when you're buying a property together, you can choose two different ways. So for instance, if you're single or you want to buy it with someone else, as in a property, you can sort of hold the property in two different ways, as joint tenants or as in tenants in common, right? Joint tenants, the owners each hold an individual share of the whole property. So for instance, you have Bill and Mary. If Bill, for instance, goes to sell or unfortunately something untoward happen or he dies, Linda then acquires the property but then has to pay someone out, or it's like a 50-50, but you'd also have some terms and conditions there that you'd want to set up with your solicitor before entering that agreement and triple check everything. Whereas in tenants in common, the owners of that property, so owners separately hold an individual share of the property, very similar to that fractional, whereas 5%, let's say there's Bill and Mary, they both own 50%. It's like a 50-50. They could do it as a 70-30, something like that. Something happens to one of those, you'd also want to make sure that the will is in place or something like that. You may have an agreement, heads of agreement, to sort of specify a watertight contract if anything was to happen between either or both of the owners. What happens then if it's split up? Very simple. It's a different, mostly for joint tenancy. In that tenancy is in that agreement, everyone's name is on the title as co-owners. The key feature of joint tenancy is that if one owner dies, their share of the property automatically passes to the remaining co-owners, regardless of any will, right? It's sort of, I think it's known as the right of survivorship. This setup suits couples or partners who want to ensure the property easily transfers to the other in case of death. However, if one property wants to sell their share and the others don't, they might need to go to court to sort it out, right? So that's always to be aware of. The tenants in common, it sort of allows individuals to own their specific shares of the property, which can be different. So like I was saying before, so it could be 60-20, 20 if you had three owners, or 50, 25%, that sort of thing. That's the ratio, or you could do 50-50, like I said, depending on how many people there are, or owners. Each owner's shares corresponds to their contribution to the purchase price. So once again, if you own 50% of something and it's $1 million property and you put in 500,000 plus fees, and so to the other person, you'd get 50-50. If it was 60 and there was 3 owners, let's say one person puts in 600,000, the other person puts in 200,000, they own 20%, and 20% for the other 200,000 to make up 100% of that million. Pretty simple stuff. But unlike the joint tenancy, if an owner dies, the share can be left to someone else in their will. Or if there's no will, it passes accordingly to legal rules on inheritance, right? So it makes it simple. So if a couple is married, 9 times out of 10 it'll be joint tenants. If they're not, they're individual people or couples, there could be trusts or whatever, tenants in common is commonly seen. But like anything, I would always recommend that you do speak to someone in relation to this before you go committing into any sort of agreement or sale, especially when it comes to, your name on the title or what name's going to be on the title, that sort of stuff. Do your research, speak to your key professionals, accountants, solicitors, financial planners, brokers, whatever, whoever you deal with there, and make sure you got a really good overview on that and it suits you, not just whatever you sort of are being told what to do. Always do your due diligence, your DD there. So quick episode, hope it helps. Please let me know, add some comments, always happy to reach out and reply, as you know, and see you on the next episode. Thank you.